yeah, it is reasonable, it is sensible, but we as corporation can't do it. So I got into the frustration loop where there was nowhere for me to go. So essentially, even when I was leaving the company, I sent a message like, it is in 20 years' time, I will be probably more disappointed about the rules that I didn't check and didn't try to explore than about what I'm doing now.
Hey guys, welcome to the How I Got Here podcast. I'm your host, Travis Waters, and I designed this podcast to share stories that are worth telling. Whether it's about somebody going from zero to hero, hero to zero, or simply something in between. On today's episode, we are joined by Marek, the co-founder of H.I.G.H. We get to learn about how he first started off with a fascination for space and wanting to become an astronaut, all the way to leading one of the global leaders in esports data. Let's go ahead and hop into our conversation with him now. Enjoy. Hey everyone, welcome to the How I Got Here podcast. On today's episode, we are joined by Marek, a co-founder of H.I.G.H. For those that may not know you by name or by face, let's start real quick with a kind of like a 10-second high-level overview of what you're up to right now in 2026.
Then secondly, I know we will go into the details most probably. So in that regard, we are creating a wider holding on the part of Odin GG that is called Realms Groups. So I am essentially responsible for launching new verticals and helping the team to scale them properly. Yeah, and that's pretty much it.
All right. So the first thing I like starting these episodes off with is going to your earliest possible memory. The first thing you remember having interest in or that you know you wanted to do when you grew up, what was that first idea and roughly how old were you when you had that?
Yeah, that's a tough one. It will be probably something around the age of 6 or 7 being astronaut at that point in time, of course. And then I ended up being like more reasonable and more rational, I would say. So that was probably the first one.
What what were you doing or what were you watching that kind of gave you that astronaut interest? Was it movies? Was it something on TV? Was it the actual, worldwide space race, if you want to call it that? What was that first thing that kind of made you interested in being an astronaut?
Excellent question. I believe I was or I have been a geek. So in that regard, I read a lot of books, a lot of fantasies, a lot of different things. And over the time, if you essentially think about the things that are most open up for interpretation, that create the most questions, and all of that is the universe itself, right? So from that perspective, it was very rare amount of people that actually became astronauts in their lifetime, and also they were the ones challenging the status quo in a way of getting where nobody else got to. So I believe that was what was behind all of that.
So it wasn't. So I would, if I didn't ask that question, I feel like my assumption would have been that it was the actual space race or that it was a movie or TV. But your interest was actually tied to the fact that there were so many things unanswered, and you liked that. I guess the exploration side of it.
Yeah, exactly. Like if you look, and of course, the entire science has moved ever since my childhood, which was last millennia. But in the meantime, a lot of the things when it comes to biology, when it comes to mathematics, physics, and all of that, a lot of that was answered, even though not to the extent that it has been answered till now. But from the perspective of universe, it is endless, so to speak, right? So from that perspective, there is always something to explore. At that point in time, there were TV series like Star Trek and multiple others, in a way. So that was where what drawn me to that kind of ambition. Let's call it that way.
I feel like that's the most in-depth possible, I guess, thought process that somebody in their youth could have in regards to like, oh, that's I don't know, it's pretty awesome because yeah, that's very in-depth thinking for someone at a very young age. So how long did this interest in space exist before something else took over as, okay, no, not astronaut. Now this is, I think, what I want to be when I grow up.
Yeah, I guess, this is my perception of myself back in the day. So the interpretation back then might have been much more plain than what we are discussing right now. I guess that kind of attraction to the universe and science in general uh, is still with me even to this day. It was more like that I was raised by a single mom, in socialist era. Actually, when I was what 6, there was a velvet revolution. When I was 10, the Czechoslovakia as a country was split. I ended up in Slovakian part. So essentially, there were a lot of turmoil in the way of what was and what was being built from the entrepreneurial stuff. The corporates were coming in and all of that. So essentially, I was just in the turmoil. So from that perspective, it was more on the pragmatical side of things and practical side of things, what I was about to do. And at that point in time, of course, it was also a significant influence from the family, where it was more about going to the secondary school, going to the high school essentially, and then if there is a chance, if there are options available, I will go to university. So it was more like get your trade already, so you are well set for life, and eventually you can end up being in university. So that's why I continued with economics. I was pretty much with the state exam, so I was ready to go be an accountant or something like that. But I continued into the university, which brought me to the other options available.
So I'm going to make sure that I understand that path line. So you're going for the accounting, the trade, the industry that has jobs available that can have a decent salary and everything, and you were thinking that, hey, when I get to the university, then I'll expand upon what my interest or see if there's anything else. And then when you got to university, did I understand you that you said you still had that space universe interest?
Probably around the high school, that already was like a more reasonable pathway towards the economics. Then essentially, Slovakia is a very small country. Being an astronaut will be probably something just in that regard very, very specific and very exceptional. So in that regard, that kind of childish dream was already gone, and it was more about real world opportunities, and also something that was relatively easily achievable, I would say.
I think that makes a lot of sense because I there's a movie. I don't know. My assumption is that that part of you from your childhood that had the interest in the universe, are you someone that when there's a new space movie that comes out, are you like, I'm definitely going to see this like opening night? Are you still infatuated by everything space, even now in 2026?
At some point in time, probably like not straight ahead, but at the same time, I continue reading books around around that area. I'll still continue essentially even reading the fantasy. So in that regard, there are still the options available to me these days, and of course, Artem is going up. So all of these things are still available, but not for me to participate in them like personally.
Nope, that makes plenty of sense, guys. There was a few movies that just popped in my head. And there's a movie right now as we're recording this that's I think the number one movie. I don't know if it's globally, but definitely in the U.S. with Ryan Gosling, called
Yep.
Project Hail Mary. I just saw that 2 days ago, and that I like movies that I don't know. I just like movies like that, but I don't know if I have the same infatuation with universe and space at an early age that you had. So now we're going back to high school. We're now knowing that becoming an astronaut is a less than 1% opportunity. You're saying, especially because where you're from, it's not, you don't really have a direct path to becoming one. So you switch to something that makes more sense. So you went from high school to university, and your focus at the university was accounting. Is that correct?
It was more like general, let's say, finance and management, so to speak. It was kind of funny. And just quickly going back to Hail Mary.
Yeah.
Yeah, I read the book, so I'm just looking forward to the movie itself and see whether they were able to portray what is in the book because the book was awesome. So going back to university, it was more about finance, banking, investments, and potentially having manager roles after the graduation. What was Funnily enough, I started the university with the goal of working in bank. I ended the university of don't want to work in a bank, and I ended up working in a bank. So there was really the life took it all upside down. Yeah, so it was a funny experience, I would say.
Yeah. The goal is I don't want to work in a bank. Let me take this focus, this university path, and then you wound up in a bank anyway. So before you graduated, before you got to the spot where your job was at a bank, did you during these years of university, did you have anything that happened that I don't know, maybe like you want to call it maybe like a light bulb moment or something like, oh, I can take this new skill set and I can do this is something I want to do with it. Before you graduated, was there anything popping up like that?
Yeah, there were a couple of things that we were doing with the team. There was a project called UA Manager, which was essentially you managing a company. It was more like a simulation. At the same time, it gave me a good understanding of ins and outs of production company, which help with understanding what ticks, what doesn't, what influences a certain things. So this was on a more practical level, I would say. And then, yeah, university was also the part of my life when I started to play computer games, and it essentially stick with me ever since. So outside of that, yeah, there were a lot of things that were beneficial. At the same time, when I look back, they were on the Slovak level, I would say, the university was highly valued when it comes to the expertise that they were able to provide to us. At the same time, if you look at global scale, there were still a couple of things missing.
I can go probably on a 2 to 3 hour sidebar about computer games because that was also a big fascination with me, especially in university years. I feel like if I ask you what your favorite computer game was, then I won't stop talking about it for like 45 minutes. So I'm gonna not ask that question. Different tangent, different video for a different day.
But what was the one for you then? Or what were the ones for you?
So specifically on computer, not console or anything,
Uh-huh.
the game that took most hours of my life, especially in university years for me, was World of Warcraft, and I will die on the hill that World of Warcraft is the best collective video game ever built, fully complete, and something that is designed to take hours and hours, if not years, of your life.
I agree with that. I played that one, multiple versions, and yeah, to some extent, uh, I'll go along with you on that ride because for me it is Dota 2, which as Dota Defense of the Oceans was a side map from
Yeah.
Warcraft. So not sure whether you've played that one. And of course, World of Warcraft, there's a bit of difference. So yeah, I also ended up caught in originally Blizzard world, then moving over to WoW's world. So yeah, I fully feel you.
See, this is why I didn't want to open up this can of worms because now I was going to say that I'm definitely familiar with Dota 2, and I want to say maybe 14, 15 years ago, I competed in a U.S. regional Dota 2 championship. So I swear, if I say anything else, people are gonna want to tune out at this point to this video that aren't interested in learning about this part. So we'll have a sidebar. We can talk later about computer games. So the interesting thing going back to you at university, wanting to avoid the bank job. When you graduated, did you gravitate to the bank job because as soon as you finished university, you didn't have the opportunities you thought you were going to have, or did the bank job make more sense once you got out the door?
Excellent question. It was rather a twist of events where couple of companies they developed some like uh, mm, uh, ranking of the students on the last years at universities where the sponsorship companies were able to pick essentially the candidates from that list, and I was ranked in top 5 or top 10 like across Slovakia. So there was Citibank involved, there was Accenture involved, I believe a couple of more. Actually, in the fifth year of my studies, I started to work for Procter and Gamble as a regional representative. At the same time, it involves a lot of travel across the region and all of that. So it was a challenging job. It was a lovely job. At the same time, for me, it was more about traveling by car and visiting the shops than essentially working on something else. And I was approached by Citibank whether I would accept the job with them. and it was pleasing at that point in time. So I accepted, even originally I wanted to avoid banking. So this is how I got into the banking, even though I didn't want to go into the banking. So I didn't apply myself. I was more like a selected, and the job or the job position made a lot of sense for me back then.
Okay, so that's pretty interesting. So it's something that was a an opportunity that just came to you and it was too good to pass up and it made sense for everything at the time.
Yeah.
So with that first job at the bank, how long did that period of time last for?
So that's a tough one. I spent almost a decade at Citibank. At the same time, it was 3 years in Slovakia, almost 7 years in Czech Republic. It included multiple different roles, which eventually became good for, and I'm skipping ahead with Odin because at that point in time I was responsible for product, sales, marketing, wearing multiple different hats at different times. So that kind of gave me straight ahead from the university the professional approach, also how the things are essentially treated, customer first approach, because there was never ever a situation where the customer was given a call and we didn't pick it up. That is something I'm applying in my job as well. So there are these kind of things that learn me from the perspective of drafting the contracts, from the perspective of marketing, from the perspective of different ways, how to essentially from the young graduate become hopefully a professional.
A question. So going back to that 10 years at Citibank, you mentioned that a portion of that was Slovakia and then, of course, Czech Republic. Now, with banking specifically, how did that, during that transition, how big was that transition to, I guess, the banking industry, or was there not really that much of a change besides, I don't know, maybe physical or registered addresses?
So it was more like, I worked at headquarters already, which meant at that point in time taking care of the largest corporate in Slovakia that were independent. Then I moved to SMEs in Czech Republic, which was more about portfolio approach. We catered to the mid to larger tiers in Czech Republic. So it was a job about relationship to some extent, being relationship managers, either when it comes to the sales itself, when it comes to trade as a separate product, when it comes to marketing of our services to the companies. So it was essentially everywhere. And what was very beneficial specifically in Czech Republic, was that my mentor essentially took me, and to some extent he put me at a different parts of the organization that needed a fix. So for me, I was more like which later on I was also characterized as a universal soldier. Something needed to be fixed, so I was essentially put there. So even though it was a corporation, for me it was more about, okay, I'll go somewhere, I'll learn something, I fix it, and I then move along. So this was more like not a traditional corporate job. It was more about learning at the different phases within the same company at different things.
I like that term, the universal soldier. If something's broken, you need to fix it. So 10 years, at the end of that, was it something where you found another opportunity or uh, maybe even the interest has shifted, or was it something that it was the time it was the time to go, and so you then sought another opportunity after that. So how did that 10-year relationship end essentially?
There were a couple of things that came to existence at that point in time where I hit the ceiling of my personal development in a sense that I was promised uh, a promotion. At the same time, it was not coming. So I was a bit struggling with that. I developed a job for myself that the bank was not willing to invest more into. So I was struggling on that side as well. At the same time, my mentor left, and not city, but to another country. And at the same time, whenever we had a discussion, it was more about, look, this is what I would like to do. And never ever it was, or very rarely it was, this is bullshit. Like uh, it doesn't make any sense, Marek. It was more about, yeah, it makes a lot of sense, but this is Citibank. So yeah, it is reasonable, it is sensible, but we as corporation can't do it. So I got into the frustration loop where there was nowhere for me to go. So essentially, even when I was leaving the company, I sent a message like, it is in 20 years' time, I will be probably more disappointed about the rules that I didn't check and didn't try to explore than about what I'm doing now. So that's why essentially I ended up in a situation where I was offered a job from a fintech company. That was something for me to take the creativity to build the products in. So I accepted the job, and that was essentially my way out of Citibank.
I like how the thinking was fast forwarding a decade or so, would I, if I stayed here at Citibank and I had this job, would I be happy with myself, 10 years down the road? And you're like, no, there's so many, going back to your thought process on the universe, so many unexplored opportunities. I still feel, I guess that a part of you, that main part of your interest in the universe kind of spilled into this because that seems to be your same thought process. There's so many unexplored opportunities. The industry or the world is so vast on what I'm able to do with my skill sets or with my interest. And so you left Citibank, you got an opportunity. Now this next opportunity, how long did this new role last, and how different was it from that Citibank role?
Yeah, it was only a year. It was proclaimed to be fintech. At the same time, they were not that fast, not that edgy, not that nothing, which I realized quite soon. So then there was opportunity like to go to yet another fintech, where actually that Universal Soldier is coming from the CEO of that company. And I was looking at multiple options on the market, and I spotted what was for me a miracle because there was a job in esports. And coming back to Blizzard days and World of Warcraft and Dota 2 and all of that, I was like, oh, okay, if this is available on the market, then if I'm leaving already, I'll take a look. I took a look. It was essentially a project where some of the guys that I still work at Odin, where we've met, it was not commercially successful. So it was yet another journey and probably finding myself somewhere like stable because, I was not a drifter. I spent almost 10 years at Citibank. So for me, it was just what is next so I can really spend my time and my dedication into. And one fintech, the other esports opportunity, none of them were essentially right. And yeah, when all of these roads essentially led to starting Odin.
So what year? So when you had this first esports opportunity, roughly what year are we in right now? On a trying to keep track of this chronological train ride.
Whoa, excellent question. We are Odin was 2018. We might be 2015, 2016, I believe.
Okay, so we're roughly 10 years away, or 10 years ago. You had the esports opportunity, and this wasn't necessarily the creation of Odin, but you said you met a lot of people that you created Odin with from that opportunity. So what kind of was that opportunity in a nutshell? How did that work out?
So it was B2B provider of the esports solution, even though the market was probably not yet ready for it. I was on the partnership side, so signing the deals, building the company. There were a couple of reasons why that company didn't succeed. Many of that has to do with the stakeholders. So essentially, it was, I believe, the team like of people. Also, the timing and the strategy were quite solid, but unfortunately, the company didn't make it.
And did you already have the idea for Odin during that time, or was it after that company, you know, didn't make it or folded? Then you had, okay, I still like this area. I like computer games. I like this area. I like what I was doing. I have an idea for it. At what point of that company folding did that idea kind of become a brain baby, as
Yeah,
I like to say?
there was kind of not an idea at all because I was focusing to make that company essentially work. Of course, based on what I was able to influence. And actually, the idea around Odin GG from the very beginning was that we wanted to be a bookmaker. So we didn't want to be B2B as we are now. We wanted to be a bookmaker with the competency of calculating our own esports lines, which was supposed to be our key differentiator. At the same time, once we raise the angel investment and we learn about the regulatory landscape, about the marketing budgets and all of that, we're like, we don't have money for that. What are we going to do? So because the founders were essentially one data scientist, two developers, myself, we were like, okay, let's stick probably to our guns, what we know the best, and this is data science and development things. And I got the opportunity to sell it, and it is extremely good product. So it was a great combination. And at that point in time, we realized, okay, we essentially not just want to, we had to pivot from B2C to B2B because otherwise we wouldn't have made it.
So the shift, I understand the shift, but when you were creating Odin or when it became a brain baby, what do you think was the number one thing within the industry that you were trying to solve?
When we looked at that at the market at that point in time, many times when somebody was, and I'm sorry, I will be probably too technical, but the coverage was very limited, so there were very limited amount of matches you were able to bet on. There were not that many things, not that many markets to bet on within the game, so betting opportunities, and at the same time, the uptime, so how long across the course of the match you were able to bet was very limited. Many times only 30 to 40%. So if I use the soccer parallel, the first half you would be able to bet, the second half you will not be able to bet at all. So it was not engaging at all. There were not enough models to cover that. There was not amount expertise. So this is what we were trying to essentially address. And I believe we were quite successful in addressing that for the last couple of years.
So it's very interesting that one of the things you just mentioned was the opportunity of esports on, especially on the engagement betting side of it. So uh, myself running playerprops.ai, I often have, I want to say, I mean, we're 2 years old now, so that every once in a while somebody will hop in with a DM saying, hey, when are you guys going to add esports? And my answer is essentially always the same, where, uh, I mean, granted, Prize Picks is massive across the country, and the problem is that it's only the DFS pick'em apps that are offering esports on a very high level or frequently, if you will. But the sports books, the DraftKings and the FanDuels, it's not something that, like, they maybe for the World Finals for League of Legends will add a few things up there for like team money lines, but it's such a, in the US gambling industry anyway, still very, very small, where I was like, listen, I understand that my all the users I have, the Prize Picks users are like, hey, esports, 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 because Prize Picks offers all of them, and Underdog and a few other ones as well. But what I'm getting to here is a question is for you. Even we're talking right now in like 2016, it's now 2026, and it's still not in the US market in terms of the online sports books, the FanDuel and the DraftKings. It's still not heavily present. Why do you think that is, and how far do you think esports is away from the online sports books, the behemoths, adopting the success that Prize Picks had from creating that as a very important vertical for their platform?
Yeah, excellent question and excellent summary of where we are essentially. I hope we will be able to do something about this already this year. We've been preparing for that for the last 2 to 3 years, I would say. You have a huge complexity about this because the bookmakers don't, this is chicken egg problem. Unless they see that in their sports book, they have the right product and people are betting on it, they will not see that, right? People will go somewhere else. They will not go to the sports book to bet on esports, and there are multiple other options available, fortunately or unfortunately. With that being said, we as Odin, as a B2B provider, we need to be licensed in the jurisdictions in the states where we want to support the big books. We need to be also cataloged. So you can bet on ESL, let's say, but you might not bet on Fisher or PGL because they are not cataloged there. So this is something that we are addressing as well. And last but not least, yes, the sportsbook, they need to give it a priority when it comes to integration. I hope in the upcoming month or two, we will be announcing one of the extra sportsbooks that we will start working with. We already work with Penn International for quite some time, and the esports is growing there. And of course, when it comes to, as you said, DraftKings, FanDuels, we hope that at some point in time we'll be able to get to them as well because the discussions are happening. So essentially, esports is still to some extent not well understood. a bit crippled because right now, if you can bet on half of the states for sports, only half of that half you can bet on esports because many of the regulators and also lawmakers they kind of need to be educated on esports. That usually the perception is this is underage players betting, underage bettors betting on underage players, and usually there is a lot of match fix. We as ODNGG, we are trying to essentially fix all of those narratives because we have our extended integrity monitoring. We are working with licensed sports books. We are being properly licensed in multiple jurisdictions, and at the same time, we are monitoring whether the players are underage or not. So all of those narratives are essentially not there at all. We are able to address them, but at the same time, this takes a lot of education to the market to get it through.
So you I'm trying to process all that. So you're actually thinking that this is I mean we you understand what I was saying in terms of
Yep.
the major sports books aren't taking it as serious or providing a lot of opportunities for it, but you actually think that this is not like years away. This is a few months because of the partnerships and the communications that you're having over here on the state side. So that's pretty interesting.
Also, from the perspective of where it can get as handle is that even if this is on par with the traditional sport or with the traditional sports already, still because you have just half of the states legal for esports, this will be a limitation, right? So yes, we have some work to do, of course. At the same time, we believe that when it comes to like offering in the US a proper, solid esports solution in terms of betting, we will be able to do that with some of the bookmakers that we will be launching with in the upcoming months. We will bring it there. But of course, the market will need some progress, matureness in a way of also getting and being licensed in much more jurisdictions than the ones that are right now offering or allowing to bet on esports legally.
Now, I know you mentioned earlier about the underage players, which yes, I mean over the course of all esports, they're roughly young compared to other leagues, other non-esports leagues. Now, in the US, there are a vast handful of states that have legalized betting that have banned college player props in terms of college basketball, maybe even college football, where you can't bet on, again, not necessarily
Mhm.
underage players, but extremely young players. And there's a bunch of different reasons for it, but I believe the main reason is that uh, it's a result of what is coined as keyboard warriors of people. Oh, this player only got 21 receiving yards instead of 20, so I'm going to send them death threats. And essentially, it's protecting the college athletes, the student athletes from this chaos of insane sports bettors. Now, do you believe there's any parallel from, because as you mentioned, half the states that have legalized betting have esports as an opportunity, just based on the legality of everything. Do you think there's a relation to college athletics being also banned in those similar states?
In that regard, esports is essentially global and it is differently structured than traditional sports. So you don't have such a thing as, let's say, college leagues or something like that. At the same time, and we did this some time ago, but we scanned top 100 esports teams, and out of all of that, we found one, really like one that will be essentially classified as underage from the perspective of either at that point in time Swedish or Spanish regulation, which means that the majority of the players in the team were underage, meaning below 18 years old. So this is not a problem. At the same time, this is easy to be addressed because you can just exclude those teams from the offering easily. We can guarantee that. So from that perspective, that is not a problem at all. So yes, it is. Yeah, this is the thing, right? When you think about like esports players, usually you think about the games like Fortnite. You can think about the games such as Counter-Strike, about the games such as Rocket League. Yes, there can be the players that are essentially underage. At the same time, many pros are usually not anymore. There are some prodigies that are in that category, but at the same time, usually you will find a well-rounded teams where majority is not underage at all.
It's very interesting. So yeah, I still I believe that I wasn't comparing esports and college athletics because in terms of like your point of saying that esports is global and college athletics are essentially US based. So I definitely understand that difference. But I from my point of view, I still think that there's some parallel from the reason why college athletic university player props, excuse me, are banned in a handful of states. And I think that your path of esports of because it's more of a professional league, regardless of age, and it is more global, that the states, if there's a state, a single state that does not allow college player props and also does not allow esports betting, that it's more likely that they open up
Hmm.
esports betting before college props because of it's. I understand the difference in terms of a kid in a university, playing basketball to somebody who's getting paid upwards of maybe even six figures to play professionally in a global league. So it's very interesting.
I
Go ahead.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you that there might it is interesting hypothesis, and I haven't checked that properly. Probably we should, because I fully agree with you. And from the perspective when I'm looking at the esports, and I would use the parallel probably in college sports as well. What we've seen in the past was that, there were tournaments played for $1,000 as a prize pool. So if you can match fix your game and if you can earn 5K on top of it, you are like, yeah, well, why to not do that? And many of the youngsters didn't even understand the concept of like, I'm doing something wrong because I'm match fixing, I'm throwing my match, and I'm essentially committing a fraud. And this is where we, ESIG, are educating the market. This is not the way to go, and I can also imagine a similar parallel in college football, where you are not necessarily you have a high value professional contract. Somebody send you the message, can you just throw this ball a bit off or something like that. Probably you are not matured enough. You are not going through probably a proper training or something like that. Again, I'm just making assumptions. I don't know fully, but the motivation might be or misunderstanding might be there that this is nothing weird. This is nothing, critical, so I'll just do it and whatever. At the same time, if you're already professional, if you are part of the league and there is a proper guidance, proper understanding of what are the do's and what are the don'ts, you already know your place and you already know that this is essentially not what you should be doing.
I mean, the I would yes, the match fixing when esports was only paying a few pennies essentially, like you said, for the prize pool being $1,000. But now, I mean, there are. I mean, I'm not explaining this to you because I know you know esports more than anybody else. But now the prize pools are so massive that it not to say that those players would do something like that anyway, but it's a lot less likely because they have so much more at stake for their actual contracts and
Yeah.
and the contest that they're playing. It would. Uh, I know that we talked about your favorite computer game earlier, but I'm curious now that you've essentially this is a 10-year journey that you've had from 2016 to 2026. I'm curious what your favorite esports to watch is. So if you're watching an actual feed of a competition, do you still gravitate to the 5x5, the Dota 2s, and the League of Legends, or is there something else that piques your interest more?
Uh, it is usually, and we see this across the board, is you exactly gravitate to your game that you've been playing, you've been watching, you understand the gameplay and all of that. So it's similar like world has they kind of version of football. In US, you have your version of football, and you are watching that, right? So essentially, similar to India is gravitating towards cricket. So this is what we are seeing also, and this is myself as well. So because I play Dota, I understand the heroes, the intricacies, the gameplay. I gravitate towards Dota. For me, it is also probably easy to watch Counter-Strike 2. At the same time, I probably do not appreciate the depth of the game as it is, even though Dota and League of Legends are similar games when it comes to mechanics. They have different heroes. And when I watch League of Legends, essentially, I don't understand what's going on from the perspective of heroes. I do understand only the perspective of what's going on in a nutshell, but I don't know who is scary, who is support, so who is winning, who is losing. in a longer time frame. So it is very specific to the game itself. And yes, I gravitate towards Dota.
Yeah, that's I mean it's a very solid point on what why someone would be interested in watching a specific contest. And I think I'm I think me personally, I'm on the opposite side of that spectrum where I think because I've played and got into so many different variants and genres of games over my entire life since I got my regular Nintendo at the age of 7 that I feel like even though I may not know all the intricacies of the rules or what's going on, either I pick up on them quickly or it's something that I don't know, I just like seeing another team kick another team's butt. And I feel like that's a universal language in terms
Mhm.
of like, as long as there's a score on the screen and I know which team that's associated to, then it's good. So there's this 10-year journey here. I know at the beginning you shifted, you were talking about the B2B and the B2C and everything like that, but how different is Odin today in terms of its purpose or its mission, aside from that early shift, than it was in 2016 when it first launched?
Excellent question and tough question. You know it yourself probably. We started at startup, so probably the first 2 to 3 years were more about like survival and your vision. So it was about trying different things, trying what sticks, trying what brings revenue, what brings partners, what brings you also the traction on the market because there were clients that were let's say, good as logos. So they bring the trustworthiness toward Odin. At the same time, there was not that much of a revenue. Then there were clients that brought a lot of revenue. So it helps us to essentially survive. So from that perspective, it was the first 2 to 3 years were about survival, product market fit, and essentially getting ourselves out. The next 2 3 years I would say were more about like scaling, building the roadmap, building the more and more solutions for our partners, trying different verticals. And now we are in the stage where I would say we are the market leader in our core segment, which is esports betting as such. We work globally with the most recognizable bookmakers that you can think of. Of course, we have still the others that we would like to work with. And then it is about also going further, meaning more thinking exactly about like what we are here for, what we want to achieve in a more detailed shape and form, which is working with the publishers, with the tournament organizers on the data side, sharing our integrity findings with the people within the industry, with E6, with the TOs, with the others. So in that sense, we what we discussed, like potential match fixing and all of that, we not just protect our partners from that, but also we send a strong message to the industry. This is not something that we tolerate, and we will be essentially fighting against it. And also working on other verticals. That's why building the entire Realms group so we can look also at the other verticals that are to some extent close to our business, but at the same time push us somewhere further, diversify to some extent the company. And also we have a couple of moonshots in our sleeves that we would like to work on.
So now we've essentially caught up to present day with this 10-year journey of Odin capping the entire story. How I like to wrap these episodes up with is kind of reviewing the last 40-45 minutes that we just shared together, where you started off super young, interested in the unknown, interested in the opportunities and everything that is the universe and space, wanting to be the astronaut, all the way to where you are now leading a global leader in esports data. Out of this entire journey, there's a lot of things that happen that I call butterfly effects, whether it was inside of your control or outside of your control, things that shifted your path. If you were to go through that entire story again and pick one individual event that you credit the most to leading you to where you are today, what do you think that butterfly effect or that event would be?
Just one or some?
Just one, the most
Just one.
important one to leading you to today.
There are a couple of them, of course. If I should pick just one, if we look specifically at like how I ended up at Odin, it can be really just that random advertisement on LinkedIn about the esports company here in Prague. That kind of shifted me completely from the regular journey of fintech, banking, something somewhere to essentially esports, which I loved, which I was passionate about, and at the same time, which not at that point in time, but eventually led me to start Odin GG.
All right, and then without that opportunity, you may not have ever got this brain baby that became Odin GG, and uh, and yeah, so that reason that event makes a lot of sense. Well, Marek, I want to thank you for hopping on this show and sharing your story with us. Again, if I ask any more questions about video games, this 45-minute episode turns into 3 hours very, very quickly. So we'll have maybe we'll do a separate episode just talking about that. But
We can
thank you
do
for
that.
yeah sharing your story here with us, and I hope you had a great time. And if you guys tuning in right now want to learn any more about Marek, or to learn about or get connected to Odin GG, Marek, tell people how they can reach out to you.
Yeah, I'm definitely accessible over LinkedIn. At the same time, we have our Odin GG webpage where you can write to partnerships at Odin GG. So these are the usual channels I believe that you can reach out to me.
All right. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. If you did, make sure you subscribe to this channel. We have a lot of episodes that came before this, and we'll have a lot of episodes that came after this. Marek, thank you again for sharing your story, and I hope you guys enjoyed this one.
Many thanks for having me, Travis.